Welcome to The Explainer. We're here to break down big ideas one slide at a time.
Okay, so you see a finished crossword puzzle, right? A bunch of clues, all the answers neatly locked in. It's satisfying, you know? A nice self-contained challenge.
But what if I told you that these words aren't just for a game? What if they're actually a blueprint, a kind of roadmap for overcoming a really tough challenge? Well, today we're going to unlock that story. All right, let's bring this whole idea to life. We're going to follow a story. It's about a project that was, it was difficult, it was long, and honestly, at times, it felt completely impossible. So picture this, a team of creators. Maybe they're building a new app. Their goal, it's way up there, like the summit of a mountain. It's crystal clear, super inspiring. But from where they're standing, down at the base, the path forward is a total mystery. And boy, is it a lot steeper than they thought it would be. And right away, it's a struggle. I mean, for every single step they take forward, it feels like two new problems just pop up out of nowhere, knocking them a step back. The puzzle pieces, they just are not fitting together. You know that initial 2-month timeline they had? Yeah, that stretches to 6 months, then 8. The finish line just keeps moving further and further away. In other words, the project becomes protracted. And this is a really crucial point. This wasn't just some minor delay. No, this was a full-on marathon that they had not trained for. It was testing their endurance in ways they could have never, ever expected. So what do you do in that situation? You try the obvious stuff, right? The tried and true methods. But every single time they did, the system would crash or the design would just feel off. The path that seemed so logical was just leading them in circles. And this is where the real frustration kicks in. The whole challenge was completely counterintuitive. I mean, every logical step, all the conventional wisdom they were applying, it just made things worse. The real solution, it turned out, required them to do the exact opposite of what their gut was telling them. Think about it. A little bug here, a negative comment over there. Each one on its own seems small, right? But each one was like a tiny crack. And over time, all those little cracks started to weaken the very foundation of their confidence. And that's exactly how a project's foundation gets undermined. It's usually not one big catastrophe. It's 1,000 tiny cracks, all those small failures adding up and up, threatening to bring the whole thing crashing down. Okay, so now the deadline is breathing down their necks. That final, critical decision point is right around the corner. The big presentation is looming, and the situation feels, it feels incredibly urgent. And that feeling, the one where time is officially running out, it changed everything. Suddenly, the stakes are at their absolute highest. It's literally now or never. But here's the thing. That pressure point, it's also the turning point. This is where our story completely shifts. We're moving from just reacting to the problem to actively building the solution. This is the big pivot. So, after every crash, every single setback, every moment they thought about giving up, they didn't. They took a deep breath, they regrouped, and they came back stronger. And that ability to recover, that became their most valuable asset. And look, this wasn't just about being tough and gritting your teeth. It was about being flexible. It was about creating a space where it was okay for someone to say, hey, this isn't working. And then they could adapt. They could learn from that failure instead of just being crushed by it. So, the breakthrough. It didn't just happen. It came in 3 distinct stages. And it all started with looking at the data they'd collected in a completely new way. Okay, first things first. They just stopped. They stopped trying to force a solution. Instead, they got analytical. I'm picturing a giant whiteboard, right? They mapped everything out, not looking for answers, but just for patterns, trying to see what was hidden in all that chaos, asking, what is really going on here? Then, once they had that clarity, they applied pure ingenuity. And this is the cool part. It wasn't about working harder, it was about working smarter. They came up with this clever, really elegant workaround that nobody had even considered because it basically sidestepped the main problem entirely. It was a whole new way in. And then, poof, it was like magic. All those scattered ideas, the ones that were competing with each other, they suddenly started to coalesce. The back-end code finally talked to the user interface. The design elements just clicked into place. Everything came together, forming this single, functional, beautiful thing. So, what was the end result of all this? Let's look at the final outcome of this whole journey. After all that struggle, after that one brilliant breakthrough, what happened?
Well, the result was so much more than just a finished project. It became this powerful, totally convincing success story. And it didn't just showcase the final product, but the incredible, difficult journey it took to get there.
So when they gave their final presentation, it was absolutely compelling. You know why? Because they didn't hide the struggles. They actually highlighted them, turning what was once this huge source of stress into their greatest achievement. And that brings us right back to our puzzle. See, these aren't just words on a page. Resilience, analytical thinking, ingenuity, the ability to make ideas coalesce. This is your toolkit. These are the actual names for the qualities you need to turn a brutal challenge into a huge achievement. So let me ask you this. The next time you're facing one of those long, drawn-out, counterintuitive challenges that's just chipping away at your confidence, I want you to remember this toolkit. Take a look at the tools we talked about and ask yourself, which one do you need to reach for right now?